Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 261 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The second amendment podcast does a little bit for everyone. I'm Weird Beard, and with me tonight is the greatest hostess in the known universe, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
I'm doing better than I have been lately, thank you. How are you doing, Weird?
I am doing better than I was doing very recently. Oh, there's just been a lot. I'm not going to go into depth, but there's just been a lot of chaos going on, and yeah, there was. I got knocked down, but I got up again, and because of that, we are recording this a day later. We're recording this on Tuesday the 1st instead of our usual Monday. And so I appreciate you for being accommodating, Erin.
So do you have a whiskey drink, a vodka drink, and a lager drink?
I am drinking a revolver. And
so that is technically an answer.
Yes. So I have a whiskey drink.
Okay.
I've got some infused vodkas upstairs, and I don't have any ciders.
Okay.
But I do intend to piss the night away. Oh, Chumbo.
Kids, ask your parents.
So, shall we dive into some news topics?
Sure. I was trying to think of something smart or snarky or cynical, and I got nothing. Sure, why not?
We're both doing much better, but that doesn't mean that our brains are not completely fried. So yeah, this first story's been I've been seeing a couple of people going in, but this is a very, very interesting story, and I am actually it delves into the running joke that I've been making about when anti-gunners talk about like how unprecedented the gun laws are, and I just ask people, they're always talking about the Bipartisan Safe Risk Community Act, and they're patting themselves in the back for passing it, and I'm like, cool, what'd it do? And I honestly have forgotten a lot of the things that this bill did or claims to have done, but this story is on the section of it that had to do with the federal government releasing funding for states that implemented red flag laws that met a certain set of criteria. And when we reported on this, when the law passed, I believe overall we said this wasn't too bad because at least the red flag laws suck. They are by far some of the dumbest laws ever because they lock up the guns and leave the person who has been deemed a danger to themselves and others completely unsupervised. And it's masquerading as a mental health law, but there is no stipulation whatsoever for mental health care in any way. And so it's awful, and it should be opposed entirely. But at least, as the letter of the law is written, there is a certain degree of due process that is afforded to the gun owners that are getting their property confiscated.
A certain amount. I mean, well, we've gone over this before, but I believe the major objection is, you know, there's a very thin due process, and the police come in and seize your property, and then you have to basically prove your innocence, prove your sanity, prove your whatever before you can get them back. And then there's no guarantee that you'll get them back in the same condition that they were seized. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it's better than no due process, but I mean, that's rather like saying, okay, you got punched in the gut instead of kneed in the crotch. You know, neither one is very pleasant, but one is slightly better than the other.
And So yeah, it's a little bit better. At least it is not some of the worst. And of course, also one must note that the stories of people who have had firearms confiscated due to various or seized as evidence, such as in a defensive gun use, oftentimes your firearm will be seized as evidence, and things like that. Those guns sometimes disappear, especially if it's a nice one. So there's also a very strong potential that that guns may also just kind of disappear. Oh, what, that custom 1911? I don't remember seeing a custom 1911. Do you have a receipt for it? Huh, that's funny. It's not in the evidence locker. And so, yeah, I mean, and it's awful, but at least there is some lip service towards, if we're going to be having this stupid, horrible law, at least there is some stipulations for due process and allowing for someone to have a public defender if they don't feel like shelling out their own money to essentially justify guns that were taken away that should have never been taken away in the first place. Again, these are, if this was a if this was a felony conviction or anything like that, or the person was being institutionalized against their will, then yeah, congratulations, their guns are being taken away. That's full due process. This is just somebody said something and a judge signed off on it. And of course, we've also stated that the judges are going to be encouraged to lean on the side of taking the guns away, because while it sucks that you strip the guns from an innocent person, it's not quite as bad as far as PR goes if a judge refuses to take the guns away from somebody and they go out and hurt somebody else or themselves. So why not just err on the side of conscience, as a certain Republican president said, take the guns now, ask questions later.
I thought he said due process later, which is even worse.
I mean, I yeah, probably, but super pro-gun president. So, but it turns out that the DOJ doesn't care. And they are releasing funds to states that have red flag laws already in place or are passing red flag laws that do not meet these requirements. So this is turning out to be just a straight up bribe to pass gun control.
I'm being quiet because yeah, there it is. Well, it's even worse than that. It actually says that there are at least 8 states and territories that don't have any red flag laws at all. I mean, you said poorly implemented. These have none.
Oh.
But they still received federal funds under this DOJ program.
Well, isn't that nice? And criminal.
I mean, it's a case of, choose your poison as to which one is worse. I mean, either it's, corruption, graft, and bribery, or it's incompetence. Because, or maybe it's both. I don't know, but yeah, they are giving money to ineligible states.
And the good news is that it's the DOJ doing this, and so therefore the DOJ will this call will invoke the DOJ to investigate themselves, and they all find that they did not. Who do you call when the people that are giving you problems are the cops?
Oh, man, I just saw something on Facebook today, and I don't remember the details, but it was, I believe the government asked the FBI to investigate which government agency bought some, I think, software that they were told not to buy, and upon investigation, the FBI found out that the FBI is the organization that bought the software, the product, the whatever, that the government told them not to buy.
Oh.
So... that's reassuring, isn't it?
But at least they found no wrongdoing in the fact that they did that. And speaking of a cynical view of the government, This is a very, very interesting story. I mean, it really just kind of affirms what I think everybody knew already, which is, but this study used some scientific methods to determine that, in fact, people who are being contacted by firearms ownership surveys are indeed lying and saying, no, I don't have any guns at all. I lost them all in a tragic boating accident. Essentially, this study was, this was done by Rutgers University, and they essentially took a survey of firearms owners. Was it a national survey? Yes. And they asked people a bunch of questions and got some people said that they owned firearms and other people said that they did not own firearms, but they asked a bunch of other social questions, and they found that essentially the people who admitted to owning firearms fit a certain profile within the other questions answered, and they found that there was a big chunk of people who said that they owned no firearms who also fit this profile that essentially they're calling the gun owner profile. And so, I mean, again, the ultimate takeaway here is that there's no real good way to judge how many people own firearms in the United States, given that there are places, I mean, huge swaths of this country where people who don't even own any guns still own guns. My anti-gun family members have all owned various amounts of guns as well, just because, I've got an old shotgun and an old 22 or a revolver that's, I haven't used it in years, but it's, it's tucked up in an attic somewhere. It's up in a shoebox. Guns are durable goods. They last for a long time, and so therefore they get passed down. And sometimes they may go from a fanatical gun owner that loves them and shoots them, and they are active gun owners, to people that just kind of possess them. I've told a lot of people about the story of my daughter's rifle that she is now old enough to be shooting. I'm very proud of her. But that rifle was the gun that my father learned to shoot on. It was not a gun that I shot at all as a child. I was in my 30s, late 30s, the first time I ever shot this rifle, because it was Dad's rifle, and he just kind of kept it with him over the years, but he never shot it, and he never took care of it, and it ended up rusting into a horrible, horrible condition. And my friend Wally, who was on the show several years ago, he ended up fixing it up absolutely beautifully. It's amazing. It's considerably better than new. But got it working again, and now it's my daughter. But just that was I grew up in an anti-gun household, and I also grew up in an anti-gun household that had guns. So this ties this in, and there's a lot of speculation on where these numbers point. Again, there's a lot of talk of the growing number of African American females that are entering into gun ownership, and I would also, again, as I keep saying, we need to stay away from partisanship within the Second Amendment fight, because number one, we need as many numbers as we can get, and number two, not all of these new gun owners are conservative people or white people or rural people. There's a whole lot of urban left-leaning people of color in this mix, and we need to make sure that they know that they're welcomed.
So here's the thing that bothers me about this article. And so it says that it should be emphasized that the report authors didn't conclusively identify anybody who denied gun ownership as a gun owner, but it dealt in probabilities. And as you said, they built profiles of confirmed gun owners and then looked for similarities. And so they were able to determine, 3,500 people responded, and they came up with 1,206 confirmed owners, and between 1,243 and 2,059 non-owners, and then potential but secretive owners lying about their status between 220 and 1036. And what this tells me is that if you believe that it's no one's business whether or not you own guns, you just shouldn't answer at all.
Mm-hmm.
Don't lie, just don't answer. Because it's not exactly chilling, but it is disturbing that they can say, well, based upon your other answers, we've got a pretty good idea that you may, in fact, be a gun owner, and you're lying to us, you awful liar. I'm not a doomsayer about this particular topic, but it does give me pause. And there's a fair amount of whining in this article from the people who are running the surveys. And, the implications of false denials of firearms ownership are substantial. And it basically comes down to, well, we can't do our job properly and we can't get proper statistics and things like that. But really, what I think summarizes the article is the last sentence of the first paragraph, which I will quote, and it says, "Academics are unhappy that privacy-minded respondents impair their understanding of the world we live in, but such evasion is an inevitable consequence of decades of fiery debate and punitive gun policies." And I'd say that's absolutely true.
It also doesn't
kind of ironic.
Yeah, it also doesn't hurt that or doesn't help that academia is often rife with these ivory tower anti-gun people
or wholly funded by them, such as the Michael Bloomberg School of some kind of health, but it's definitely anti-gun at Johns Hopkins.
Yes. Yeah, you have the Bloomberg School, but you've also you've got all of these academics that are, Arthur Kellerman is a great example. Of course, you've got Garen Wintermute and a bunch of other people that are in various academic positions that are firmly in the pocket of anti-gun people like Michael Bloomberg. And so, including the Johns Hopkins School, which is so funded by Michael Bloomberg that they named it after him. There is that fiery business. And actually I will include it in the show notes, but Colion Noir just put out a one of his Fisk style videos, which I love. He does amazing Fisk work, and he's got his own style, and I've got mine. So I think that they are complementary of each other. But he was doing Matthew McConaughey, and Matthew McConaughey was speaking as if he was some sort of moderate supporter of gun control. Though I would argue many of his statements were very clearly coming from a position of ignorance on the fact that he is a professional actor. He is not a professional Second Amendment person. And clearly, he's from Uvalde, Texas. So the chances that Matthew McConaughey has shot a firearm in his life are probably extremely high, but also the chances of him knowing much at all about firearms or firearms law. Firearms law, he clearly knows absolutely nothing. But one of the things he was talking about was the standard trope of we need to have, we need to talk to gun owners and give them convincing arguments. But meanwhile, he's, sitting on, I can't remember if he was at CNN or which network news agency, but one of the places that is deeply not friendly to gun owners, and talking to an anti-gun reporter who is very open about being in favor of gun control and frustrated by the fact that we still have a Second Amendment. And that's where they were talking. He's not like sitting down with Colion Noir, who lives in Texas. He's not sitting down with, someone who is, a John Lott or anybody else who is a well-learned activist for the Second Amendment cause, who would have a respectful debate and challenge the crap that he is spewing as quote unquote common sense gun control. And so there are certainly these, very much ivory towers in the world that are safe havens for the ignorance of anti-gunners. But they're fussing because, hey, guess what? They don't know how many we are. They just know that there's lots more. There's lots more gun owners than they think, which should be a little bit scary to them and good.
They make some concern troll noises about, if we don't know how many gun owners there are, if there's this existence of a large group who falsely deny firearm ownership, then we can't get to them in order to promote firearm safety, and may fail to reach these communities in need. In other words, we don't know where to target the brainwashing. Mm-hmm. I mean, secure firearm storage is a good and fine thing. Please don't get me wrong, but there is a difference between, keep your guns secured in a safe and, well, the only way to safely secure them is to not only keep them unloaded, but the ammo separated from them. And, if you need a defensive firearm in the middle of the night, the last thing you need to do is to open one safe and get the gun and then open another safe and get the ammo and things like that. I don't know if I'm being too suspicious or not, but it really seems to me like they are saying without saying that, there's this untapped market that we can't get to persuade to our way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, certainly I will say
in closing.
Yep, go ahead.
So in closing, my advice is that unless you want to talk about them, I say that it's no one's business but your own whether you have them, and just hang up or throw the letter in the garbage. Don't tell them anything.
And certainly, yeah, if you're not interested in conducting a survey, a lot of surveys that go through have to be completed for the data to be useful. And so therefore, if you hang up before the last question is asked, that may have been a waste of everybody's time. So yeah, if you're not at all interested in participating in a survey, or you thought you were interested but things are taking a turn for you and you may have changed your mind, yeah, just hang up. But certainly as far as the safe storage propaganda that's going through, I think there are a handful of people that are knowledgeable of firearms that are proposing you need to have a safe for your ammunition and a safe for your gun, and they can't be anywhere near each other, and the gun must be unloaded and locked in one safe, and the ammunition must be in another safe. And so therefore, and the whole point of that is it makes a firearm completely useless for home defense. And it makes it a complete pain in the butt, if not a liability for things like concealed carry and things like that, because it encourages excessive administrative handling of the firearm. But at the same time, if somebody is interested in ending their own life, they can take as much time as they want to gather up all the pieces of the firearm and assemble them in such a way so that you could still have tragedy. You just can't have any success stories. And then that propaganda gets passed on to the rank and file gun prohibitionists who don't know the difference between an AR-15 and a Smith & Wesson Model 13. And so they're just happy to repeat it. And somebody who knew more than them told them this is safe, and so therefore they're doing the right thing and this is safety. And so they'll just happily preach away. And again, the idea is where the Elmer Fuds come from. If they can reduce firearms just to sporting use, that's the easiest thing to argue away. If you like target shooting, well, no, just go take up golf. If you like hunting, guess what? They got chicken and beef at the grocery store. Just go get it there. You don't need to go out in the woods. Get rid of those dangerous guns.
Yeah, I don't have the link handy because I was just reminded of this. But in relation to sporting, I remember reading somewhere that the Biden administration was withholding funds to schools that had not just rifle teams but archery teams.
I had heard about that. I didn't delve too deep into it. But yeah, I mean that's
and so well. I mean that backs up what you're saying. You know, it is very easy to get rid of the sporting culture.
Yeah, because it's just a game. It is very, very hard to argue against somebody saying I have a firearm for home defense and I carry a firearm for personal protection and protection of my family, when there are, anywhere between 250,000 and 1 million people who defend their lives with a firearm every single year. Or I have a firearm because once a year I go out and shoot ducks, or once a year I go out and shoot deer, or I like to go out to the local range and shoot groupings. Well, that's great, but that's just you're just playing a game, and you're playing a game with a dangerous tool. That's the nature of lawn darts. I don't think anyone was ever actually killed with lawn darts, but they were an inherently dangerous toy, and they were a toy. And so because of that, they no longer make them. I don't even know if they actually passed a law against them, but you can't get lawn darts anymore. At least you can't get the good metal spike ones there. I think they made some like plastic neutered lawn darts, but who wants those?
Okay. So I found an article, and it's written by, our admired colleague, Mr. John Lott. And so it's on crimeresearch.org, talking about Biden administration is withholding funding from schools with hunting and archery programs. And this is part of, because you mentioned what did the 2022 Bipartisan Safer Communities Act do? Well, apparently this is part of it.
Oh, crazy. I don't remember reading that.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's an interpretation with an emanation and a penumbra and things like that. But I've got it listed in the show notes.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's in the show notes, and let's just move on to the last topic, which I threw in more of. I think it's kind of a microcosm of the gun violence and gun control issue. And this is the headline is multiple explosive devices used as embalming at encampment outside Seattle hospital. Essentially, this happened in Seattle, and this was essentially a homeless camp that was there, and there was a series of explosions. And according to witnesses and knowledge of the area, it's believed that the tent that was targeted with these explosive devices was likely selling illegal drugs. And so I saw this and saw it immediately as the go ahead, push gun control all you want. I mean, explosives are ridiculously regulated. They are very, very difficult to purchase legally, though as someone has a biology degree and so sat through a whole lot of chemistry classes, there's always that section in the textbook that talks about the various forms of explosives and how they're made. So it's They're difficult to acquire and difficult to buy, but you can cook them up if you know what you're doing. Not that I am suggesting anybody do that, but I suspect that these explosive devices were homemade. But yeah, it shows that, again, violence always happens around the illegal drug trade because, again, they can't rely on fair competition rules or the court systems to protect their interests, and so therefore they have to take matters into their own hands, and if they're not using illegal guns, well, they'll just make bombs and blow each other up. Certainly happened a lot during prohibition of alcohol. There was a whole lot of speakeasies that would get firebombed.
So this week, Weer'd Fisk's Lucy McBath, whose attitude seems to be look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it.
So while on patrol for Audio Fisk fodder, I stumbled on the YouTube channel for the Democrat Party. Now, while I flay anti-gun politicians in these Fisks, I'm going after the anti-gun policies, not the party. There are a ton of anti-gun Democrats out there, but there are still people on the left who are on our side, just as there are Republicans who are more than happy to vote us up the river, even some while saying that they will help us out. No idea which prominent Republican I might be talking about there. Also, libertarians, wipe that smug look off your face. In 2016, the Libertarian Party candidate for president was Gary Johnson, who I voted for. With the alternatives, could you blame me? And his running mate was Bill Weld, the very same Bill Weld who signed the Massachusetts assault weapons ban into law. Either way, I was scrolling through their DNC's very thin catalog of videos, expecting to see something about Joe Biden and his endless rants of banning assault weapons, or his support of the ATF's violations of the Second Amendment. But instead, I saw a familiar face. I've been following the Congresswoman from Georgia, Lucy McBath, for around a decade now, and I knew this would be a good choice. But I'll let her speak for herself.
20 years ago, I never imagined that I would be representing Georgia in Congress. Yet, at my core, the mother of Jordan Davis is the most important title that I will ever hold.
This is a very common theme of a political figure that leads with their child. I'll let her continue.
There I saw my phone lit up and Jordan's father's face was on the phone. And that's when he told me that Jordan had been murdered and he was in the car with his friends, 3 of his friends, at a convenience store gas station. A man pulled up next to them on the passenger side where my son was sitting. And he said that they were simply playing their thug music too loudly. He then took a gun out of his glove box and fired 3 rounds, killing my son, Jordan. Just at that moment, I just saw black and I just fell to the floor and started screaming.
So first up, I'll pass on my deepest sympathies to Representative McBath. Just because I fist people like you and Manuel Oliver, who lost his son Joaquin in the Parkland shooting, doesn't mean I don't have sympathies for your loss, or that your children somehow deserve to die. No, I'm simply disapproving of your reaction to their death, namely in your attack on lawful gun owners who had nothing to do with their deaths. All while you ignore the larger problem that actually contributed to their deaths. Now in this Fisk, Representative McBath is going to tell some lies and half-truths. But as far as her account of her son's death, everything she states has been corroborated by sworn witness testimony.
Because I think at that moment I felt like it didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how well I raised him. It didn't matter how well I tried to protect him and keep him safe. Gunned down simply because he was a young black male.
Okay, this is the last she talks about the death of her son. The only fault I have on her statements are the facts she didn't mention. So here are the important facts as I see it. On November 23, 2012, Representative McBath's son, Jordan Davis, and several of his friends stopped at a gas station in Jacksonville, Florida to buy cigarettes and drinks. While the driver stopped and went inside, Jordan and his friends listened to music, likely at an inconsiderate level. Meanwhile, Jordan's killer was parked in the same lot, and he was on his way back to his hotel room after attending a wedding and having an excessive amount of drinks. The killer told his companion, "I hate that thug music," and walked over to the car and asked them to turn it down. Jordan and company refused. I'm willing to bet neither party was polite in this exchange. As the driver came back from the store, the killer then returned to his car, retrieved a 9mm pistol, and proceeded to empty the gun into the car that Jordan was sitting in, as they fled the parking lot. Jordan was hit multiple times and died at the scene. Meanwhile, his killer got back into his car, drove to his hotel, walked his dogs, ate a pizza, drank some more, and then drove home the next morning. By this time, the police had used surveillance footage and eyewitnesses of the shooting to identify the killer and drove to his house to question him. At this time, the killer claimed to see something that looked like a shotgun in the car and was in fear for his life, even as the vehicle sped away. Nothing resembling a firearm of any kind was found in the car where Jordan died. So Representative McBath is right. She probably couldn't have done much to protect Jordan. And while it might have been ill-advised to rudely respond to a drunk man who's likely yelling inflammatory and racist things at you, their actions did nothing to justify his violence. She's also right that there's more than enough evidence that Jordan's killer had some racial prejudice, and likely that fueled the violence in the encounter. But what about what happened after he finished shooting? The killer did not call 911 to report having a weapon pointed at him, or even report that he had fired on an occupied vehicle. He simply finished up his trip as planned. The killer told his companion that they had attacked him, but said nothing about a firearm. It wasn't until the next day and over 100 miles away that the killer mentioned the alleged shotgun to the police. This is one factor in this case that I feel always gets overlooked. It's clear that this is a case of murder, and Jordan Davis's killer will serve the rest of his life in prison for his actions that night. But his justification for shooting Davis was always some permutation of Florida's Stand Your Ground law. Who is advising lawfully armed people to shoot at a fleeing vehicle, then fleeing the area without contacting the police? Not firearms trainers, lethal force experts, or Second Amendment activists. But the gun prohibitionists hate any law that clarifies when deadly force can be used. So they've been calling concealed carry permits, stand your ground law, and castle doctrine a license to kill or a license to commit murder, implying that if somebody simply states, "I was in fear for my life," that they will get away with even the most foul and blatant murders. Something tells me that the gun prohibitionists planted the seed that grew into Jordan's killer, thinking he could get away with murder that night.
And then I was beginning to understand that there were so many like Jordan that were dying in communities all around the country. And I just felt incensed and angry and wanted to help move the needle to make sure that something in this country was going to be done to protect our families and our future generations.
This is disingenuous. The murder of Jordan Davis was national news, both because of likely racial motivations of the killer, but also because of the butchery of Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground laws. Really, killings like this are very rare, both in racial motivation and the fact that Jordan's killer was lawfully armed at the time and had a Florida concealed weapons license, and the fact that he attempted to use Stand Your Ground to justify his actions. The bulk of teens and young adults killed by violence of any kind are inner city people with ties to gangs and the drug trade. These killings are rarely more than a footnote on the local news, and not a national story. This is very important because if you take away stand your ground or concealed carry permits or magazine capacities or whatever common sense gun control might cross your mind, it may prevent rare crimes like the murder of Jordan Davis, but it'll do nothing to stem the violence happening in our major cities every day.
I went on to work for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America and Everytown for Gun Safety, fighting across this country for safer gun laws in our communities.
The very same corporate lobbies that wrote the same propaganda that taught people like Jordan's killer that he needn't fear prosecution in Florida if he had a concealed weapons permit and said he was in fear for his life after attacking a bunch of fleeing teenagers. Also interesting that she worked for Moms Demand Action and Everytown, as if she was working for two different groups, when in fact, they are the same group. Reminds me of that line from Star Wars.
These tracks are side by side. Sand people always ride single file to hide their numbers.
The sand people walk in single file so that their opponents will underestimate their numbers. Meanwhile, gun prohibitionists spread out wide to give the illusion that they are legion, while they are actually very few. Why be just Everytown for gun safety when you could be Everytown and Moms Demand Action and March for Our Lives and The Trace and Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health? You'll also note, I suspect that the Giffords and Brady gun control lobby are also being controlled by Michael Bloomberg as well, as they work in lockstep with the above groups.
Then I decided if I was truly going to protect our families and our children, I would have to stand up and run for office myself.
This is another interesting point. See, when Lucy McBath was working for Moms Demand Action, its chairwoman, Shannon Watts, was being groomed by Michael Bloomberg for a run for national office. Unfortunately for Watts, she lacked the charisma to woo voters, and her ties as a PR flack for massive corporations like Monsanto and her dubious backstory of a stay-at-home mom and the organic formation of Moms Demand Action meant that her political aspirations were dashed. But the year after Lucy McBath was sworn into the House of Representatives, Mark Kelly, the founder of Americans for Responsible Solutions, now the anti-gun lobby and Everytown ally Giffords, was sworn into the Senate. Bloomberg wants loyal retainers in high government positions to push his agenda for him directly. And he's making progress.
And I had people tell me, you're a black woman, don't run on gun safety in Georgia. It'll never happen. But I felt like, well, who is going to stand up to protect our families? If not anyone else, then why not me?
This is pure crap. I actually fisted a speech by Ms. McBath when she was working for Everytown at the Moms Demand Action rally in Atlanta. On the same stage with Lucy was Representative John Lewis, a black man from Atlanta who was an active supporter of gun control and served in Congress until the day he died. And who is more anti-gun than Sheila Jackson Lee, who is a black woman from Texas? If she isn't lying and friends of hers actually told her a black woman from a pro-gun state, despite representing an anti-gun city, couldn't win, this statement was clearly made in ignorance.
So I announced my run for the United States Congress and was sworn into office in 2019, where I have been fighting tirelessly for gun safety reforms ever since.
Just as Michael Bloomberg commands. Also, gotta love the gun safety, as if they care at all about safe handling and ownership of firearms.
When I lost my son, I never could have imagined that I would help usher in the largest gun safety bill in decades. But in June of 2022, I did.
Largest in decades, meaning that it's been decades since anything gun control was passed on the federal level. So the bar was pretty low. But go ahead and pat yourself on the back, Lucy, because no one else is going to.
It was very bittersweet. It was very bittersweet to be at the White House on the day that, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was actually ushered in by the president, because I felt like I wasn't able to save my own child. And there were so many other people who had lost their lives. But I think it was that day that really, really just fueled additional fire in my spirit that I was going to continue to do this for the rest of my life, because change does happen, and we just have to remain committed and diligent and stay focused. And it's absolutely critical that we support members like me in our re-elections and all over this nation, because maintaining and building on our majority in Congress is more important than ever. The time for action is now. We cannot be complacent.
Boy, she lays the last part on a bit thick. First up, Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was just barely that, as 0 Democrats voted against this bill, and only 24 Republicans across both houses voted for it. Also, she says, I was unable to save my own child, and there were so many other people who lost their lives. She doesn't follow up with that anywhere. Was this a rhetorical statement? When I heard her say that, I assumed she was going to say, but this will save the lives of others. If she was, well, that lie was a bridge too far. But in the end, it's just a big, vote for me and send me money. There is certainly something to be said about her dedication to using her son's death as means to push laws that would have not changed anything, but certainly will help good people who are trying to actually keep their communities safer. We need to not only have this level of commitment to our cause, but it needs to be stronger, because we know that gun prohibitionists are liars and don't care about keeping innocent people safe. We're the ones who care about safer communities. And if we don't do something, nobody will. Those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them. All right. It's a Weird Audio Fisk. I need an Erin rating.
It was pretty good. I liked it. I saved a copy of it. I don't think it really went for the jugular like some of your other audio Fisks, but I have no complaints. I have generalized compliments. You know, it was good. I liked it. And I think what I liked about it the most, and the main reason that I saved it, is so that if someone brings up the murder of Jordan Davis, and he was in fact murdered, and the person who killed him definitely committed a crime and needed to go to jail, and I'm glad that he's in jail, and that was an absolute... You can't even really call it an abuse of stand your ground, because stand your ground just very obviously didn't apply. He tried to fig leaf with it, and it didn't work. But yeah, this is a very nice, concise summary of what happened and why what this guy claimed is garbage. And so I liked that.
I would also argue that I have I included in the show notes a video from JCS, which is a true crime YouTube channel, and it has the interrogation, the police interrogation footage of the killer and his fiance, and it is very, very insightful. It doesn't specifically say, I mean, obviously he knows that he's, you know, under investigation for murder, and so therefore he is not going to say, oh, all these news reports said that concealed carry and having concealed carry permit and saying you're in fear for your life means that I can get away with murder. But I still have to say, I always say, where the heck did he get the harebrained idea that he could just shoot a gun into an occupied vehicle and then just drive away, and then when cops showed up at his door the next day, he could just say, "Oh, I was scared." He didn't get that from Second Amendment activists. He didn't get that from firearms trainers. But again, I have in the show notes several articles talking about how your concealed carry permits, you're licensed to murder, and stand your ground is licensed to murder. So I don't think this is the intention of the gun prohibitionists. I think they just want people to repeal them, but you also have to understand that if you say these lies, people may believe them, and that might induce something that you don't want.
Mm-hmm. So pivoting from things we don't want to things we do want, on the ACP Discord, Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns actually asked, hey, is there any interest in an e-bike segment? And I said, yes.
Yes, and so now in the true spirit of the variety nature of the Assorted Calibers podcast, Matt is going to talk about e-bikes.
Hi, Matt with Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns here. Figured I'd drop in and do another segment that's something that I've been starting to play around with it recently and have found really interesting and far more intriguing than I ever expected. And that's e-bikes. You're like, yeah, bicycles are a good way to get around. So what? Why do I want to spend so much more and get a bicycle that has a battery in it? That honestly is an interesting question and a really good one. It's a question I was asking for a long time. And the truth is, ended up going down that pathway a bit, and I'm really surprised with what I found down here. So, first off, to give you an idea what an e-bike is, it's not just a bicycle that has a battery attached. The idea behind it is you have an electronic motor that gives you assistance when pedaling. There's two different kinds. One that does a hub motor, so the hub is in the middle of the wheel. As you add power, it will either go by a torque sensor on the pedals, but most of them do a cadence. So how fast you're hitting the pedals and how fast the wheel is spinning. That's how it goes about applying power. Now, the way it's set up currently is most e-bikes fall into three different classes. You have a class 1, which means whenever you're pedaling, you get an assistance. And the bikes all have a computer and a controller, so you can set how much assistance you want. So you can have no assistance at all, and it's just your basic bike. And you can bike around with no assistance at all, no battery power, doesn't matter, it still works as a normal bike, but you have the ability to slap these batteries in, turn them on, and give you assistance. Now, Class 1 means it can go up to 20 miles an hour as an e-bike, so as you're pedaling, it can add assistance up to 20 mile an hour. Now, once you hit 20 mile an hour, you can pedal and go faster than that, but the motor is not assisting past 20 mile an hour. Then there are Class 2 e-bikes. Most e-bikes you see are normally a Class 1 and Class 2. Class 2 is everything as Class 1, except for it adds in a throttle. So you can just either push down on a throttle or turn a throttle, and you can just crank out full 20 mile an hour without having to move a pedal at all. It's almost like a little electric motorcycle. Actually, that's kind of what it is. Then you have Class 3 bikes, which go even more. Class 3 is not legal everywhere. You have to look at your local laws. Some states allow it, and some places allow it, like you can have it on this location and that location. Class 3 is pedal assistance only. Now, you can get a lot of bikes that will come as a Class 3. Those allow you to go up to 28 mile an hour. You normally have to unlock it. And once you hit 28 mile an hour, you can get there. But you have to be doing pedal assistance. So you have to be pedaling in order to reach the 28 mile an hour. So you can really crank up the speed. I will tell you, it's a lot more than you ever really expected to be going at that speed. You are really closing in on motorcycle territory if you're going to get up there. E-bikes aren't cheap though. But really what I would suggest is why I would consider an e-bike is not really what I expected when I first got one. What you find is you have the battery there, and it encourages you to go and do more than you would have thought of. So before, it's like, I wouldn't try that because, hey, I'm going to get there, and what if I get tired halfway? How am I going to get back? Am I going to walk the bike back? With an e-bike, you know, hey, even if everything goes to the end, I don't feel good, I can't get the bike back. You know, you have that throttle you can use to get yourself back to where you started. Which means I've started pushing bike rides into many, many more miles than I would have ever considered just 6 months ago. It is amazing, and it has me out there and actually biking a heck of a lot more. As for usefulness for this, other than getting out and having fun and enjoying the environment, you can get around in small environments. But several of these do take weights up to about 300 or 330 pounds. So especially if you're on the lighter weight of things, you can use it to carry around some cargo. And you add into that, you can get solar panels, and with the right setup, you could recharge these even if everything goes wrong, power's out, depends on what you have for power storage. But it is not impossible that these things can be recharged. You don't have to worry about gas delivery. All you need is the battery or batteries for your bike, and you can buy spares. Batteries aren't cheap. You're talking $200 to $500, maybe more, really depends on the bike. But it is an interesting secondary option you can have for travel when things go sideways and things go down. Not to mention, bikes can go places cars can't. Might be something worth considering in a prepper territory. I am no expert, but I have to admit this is a really cool area to look at. And of course, if you want, you can send in any questions like what I'm using, what I've experienced with. Ironically, to get things going, I actually have tried out both a hub motor and a mid-drive, which means the motor is right near your pedals. Downside with doing that, there are upsides, there are also downsides. The downside is mid-drives are more prone to snapping chains. Not so much on a hub motor, which honestly have little to no maintenance, but you also don't have your gearing on your bike able to be enhancing the power that comes off of your motor.
So that segment ended rather abruptly.
I noticed that as well, but I unfortunately really was editing it a little bit later that I didn't feel right in saying, hey, could you put like a little something on the end there? But so we got the end music and there we are. But
okay, well, I mean, I'm just glad he was finished rather than just getting cut off somehow.
No, he wasn't listening to an ACP blooper reel while driving his truck.
So yeah, e-bikes are very interesting, and I put forth the idea of, well, I mean, you know, how hard are they to charge using solar? Because then it could be used for prepper purposes. And the problem, like, well, you know, when it comes to solar, the big problem is the solar panels. And they are expensive, and they are terribly inefficient because of the atmosphere, which we need to breathe and not die from cancer. But, you know, because the atmosphere does all these wonderful things for us, it makes it really inefficient in terms of transferring solar power. So I think it was Jake, also known as the Egghead. I don't think I'm outing him. I think he's known.
Yep. No, he's comfortable with it.
Okay. And he said something along the lines of you would need like a minimum of 3 100-watt solar panels in order to reliably charge an e-bike. And those things run between $200 and $3 per panel. So, I mean, if you've got the money and you have reliable sunlight, then okay, great, go for it. But that's just a little too pricey for me and my blue-collar prepping tastes.
One of my favorite little digs towards the people that talk about, oh, we could just simply replace all of our power needs with wind and solar. Again, that's great for prepping, and it's also great for supplemental things. Actually, the zoo local to me, they just put a solar farm over their parking lot, and I am over the moon for it because it means now their parking lot is fully shaded and a little bit protected from the elements. But they're getting electricity from it and helping fund themselves. And I don't know how they've got it wired up. I could assume it's wired into the grid as opposed to wired into batteries. So it's not specifically powering the zoo. It's just powering everybody, and they're getting paid for the electricity they're producing. But I love it when there's several businesses around me that actually have solar panels over their parking lots, and it's awesome because again, parking lots are miserable in the sun. Just that black top just starts baking, and then even in the wintertime, they start getting snow and all that. Hey, guess what? It keeps the snow off the parking lot too. And then it's also producing electricity, so that's great. But I note that I was just actually doing a whole bunch of laundry the other day, and part of it was my wife's work clothes, which are all of the such delicate fabrics that they need to be run on the delicate cycle and cannot go in the dryer. And so I was stringing them up on my clothesline outside, and again noting that if wind and solar were that good a source of power, then why is it that they're far more gentle than my dryer, even set to the lowest setting?
All right, so I found what he wrote, and I'm not going to get into him showing his math, although if there's interest, I will. But he said, based on the info about the particular e-bike in question, it's about a 500 watt-hour capacity. So he said 100 to 200 watts of panels could maybe charge one of those batteries in a day of full sun. I'm not quite sure where I got the 3 panels from. That may just be my invention. And then he further geeks out. So what I'm going to do here is say that if you are interested in a more in-depth exploration of recharging an e-bike via solar, please let us know, and I will nag the Egghead into making a segment for us, and he can get into the hard math nitty-gritty for people. How about that?
Man, that sounds awesome. I'm already going to start nagging him. Egghead, I'm nagging you. So one interesting thing about e-bikes is I remember hearing about somebody who bought one, and they bought it for exercise, and their exercise regime involved they would get up, get on the bike, and start pedaling, and they would just start pedaling away from their house and pedaling as hard and as fast as they could go, and just get that bike going as fast as they could with zero electrical input, no throttle added. But then when they started to fade and they were exhausted and they felt that they could pedal no more, then that was time to turn around, and they would just turn around and turn on the power, and they would just ride home. And so it allows you to, that's certainly one aspect of bike riding for exercise or for commuting, is that if you get gassed and you're halfway to where either you need to go or halfway back home, well, that last part of the ride is going to be pretty miserable. And these ones you can dial in the cheat codes. But I also have some friends. They run a local business, and they live a few towns over, and it's about 15 miles away, and they commute in on e-bikes, and what they're doing is they're pedaling and getting a workout from it, but they're also using the electronic throttle as a means so that it can actually get them there in a reasonable commute time.
Of course, these things aren't cheap either. The one Matthew linked to is $1,000.
I mean, honestly speaking, it doesn't take much for a street bike to get up that high too.
I mean, when he was talking about this, and he was talking about you can pedal and then get an assist, I was thinking, so it's basically an electric moped. I don't know if people remember mopeds anymore. I mean, you could conceivably pedal them, but most people didn't unless you were out of gas. And so I don't know how much, mopeds or scooters cost these days. But hey, according to Amazon, they're in the $700 to $800 range, so they're less than an e-bike. On the other hand, you have to pay for gas. So, meh.
Though those mopeds don't take a lot, and depending, there were certain mopeds that you actually needed to pedal to start. You were the starter motor.
Yeah, I can believe it.
I'm looking at I'm on Trek bikes, so $1,000 actually is not unreasonable for someone to pay $1,000 for a reasonably appointed road or mountain bike. Is all I was getting at.
Wow. Okay. I had no idea. And once again, I'm reminded of just how stingy I am.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean.
All right. So continuing in the tradition of Erin demanding segments, if you recall, the last time we actually had a non-roundtable show, David talked about rolling blocks, and I was confused, and we had a discussion afterwards. Well, David came back to explain what exactly a rolling block is and how it operates in this week's episode of Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. In this segment, I'd like to delve into greater depth on the mechanical details and historical significance of the Remington rolling block action. To start off with, what does rolling block mean? Specifically, the block is the breech block containing the firing pin. This is the part that retains the cartridge in the chamber, similar to the bolt face on a bolt-action rifle. This block rotates backwards on an axis pin to expose the chamber for loading or extracting a cartridge. It's then rolled forward to close. The block itself contains no locking element of its own and is held in place only by slight spring pressure in both the opened and closed positions. When the trigger is pulled, releasing the hammer to drop, there's a wedging effect from the front of the hammer against the rear of the block that locks the breech block in place during firing. The hammer is then pulled rearward to full cock, allowing the block to be rolled back once again in order to extract the fired shell and load a new cartridge. Once the block is rolled forward into the firing position, the firing cycle can start over again. Taking a look at any of the patent drawings or cutaways of the rolling block action may make the mechanism considerably more comprehensible. In many ways, the Remington rolling block action is considered one of the best single-shot actions of its time. This is due to several factors. Simplicity. In my previous segment, I mentioned there are only 22 moving parts in the entire rifle. Most of the other parts involve the stock and forend, as well as various screws and pins needed to hold components together. Other than the barrel and perhaps the breech block, a skilled blacksmith could fabricate all the other parts of a rolling block rifle without too much difficulty. Obviously, they wouldn't be interchangeable with parts for other rifles, and quality of materials would have a significant impact on longevity as well. Even old muzzleloader barrels could be cut and threaded for use on rolling block actions. This capability was a big plus when spare parts might be weeks or even months away. Reliability. Even with so few moving parts, a certain number were still required for basic function. Then as now, one of the major weak points in any firearm is the springs. This was especially true prior to the industrialization period following the Civil War. To say spring quality varied widely would be a significant understatement. This led to a number of firearms that could quickly be deadlined by the breaking of any number of small parts. However, with a rolling block action, even if all the other springs were removed, as long as the spring that activated the hammer was intact, the firearm would still function. Versatility. Switching a rolling block rifle for a different cartridge only requires switching out the barrel and possibly the extractor. As long as the action is large enough to accept the threaded portion of the barrel for that caliber, no other changes are necessary. If switching between rimfire and centerfire cartridges, a different breech block would also be required to position the firing pin correctly. This is one of the main factors that enabled Remington to market the rolling block in so many chamberings. Throughout its production, the rolling block was offered in several different frame sizes, but as long as the frame was large enough for the maximum intended cartridge, it could be barreled for any of the smaller ones as well. Everything from the diminutive 22 rimfire all the way up to a variety of 50 caliber centerfire cartridges were possible. Some rolling blocks were even chambered in 20 gauge, which is equivalent to .617 caliber. Economy. Due to the small number of parts and simple design, the rolling block rifle tended to price lower than its competitors, sometimes well below. Combined with the relative ease of making replacement parts, this gave the rolling block a significant edge against its market competitors. This collection of characteristics gave the rolling block a well-deserved reputation as a simple and reliable firearm. It also made the rolling block a good choice for soldiers, settlers, or explorers on the edge of civilization. While the Remington rolling block arrived on the scene just too late for the Civil War, it made an appearance almost everywhere else, from the battlefield to the buffalo hunt, and was well loved in all those areas.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today with the last and one of the very scarcest versions of the Remington rolling block. This is a number 7.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments, or comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Erin or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. We're always looking for people interested in submitting posts to the blog, so please check out the site. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the name Brena Bock. That's BRENA I'm also in anthologies published under my actual name. Look for David Bock on Amazon, just not the guy who writes the computer books. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So, I understand, but I think my main problem... Okay, so the falling block. I know what that is, and I've seen it in action, and the block actually raises and lowers. It falls into the receiver, when you work the lever, and that makes sense. The rolling block doesn't roll, it pivots. It pivots on a pin. It's a small point. I may be the only person who cares, but I'm sitting here going, it doesn't roll, it pivots. It should be called the pivoting block.
That is true. I mean, we could also joke now, hundreds of years, over 100 years later, deep in the war of gun control, we can argue that when Colt decided to call the guns automatic pistols when they were in fact semi-automatic pistols, they were wrong.
I thought they were called auto loaders, and that's where that came from. You know, they were automatic loaders, not automatic firers.
Well, I mean, as since you're listening to the Assorted Calibers podcast, we chose the name to have ACP, which stands for Automatic Colt Pistol when it comes to the head stamp. I mean, I think it was just the idea of an automatic pistol was auto-loading, and that submachine guns and certainly true auto pistols were really not a thing in the early days of the 20th century. But yeah, sometimes people say wrong things. And guess what? 32 ACP really is 31 caliber.
I mean, sometimes those people are weird beard, and it drives me crazy.
But can we say, speaking of things that Erin demands, and you will say sometimes when we have, like, especially heavily firearms intense shows where all the segments are gun related, and you're like, you know what? Sometimes we need a little bit of variety, and I felt like this show really did it. We had me with a Weer'd Audio Fisk that was all politics. We have David talking about firearms, but he's talking about all hardware. And then we got Matt in the middle, and I'm going to talk about e-bikes. Guess what? We want to hear about e-bikes.
Yeah, I really like that.
And Jake, we want to hear more about solar panels. Talk about charging up some big electronics using solar panels. What do I need to do?
Have a lot of money.
Yes. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, because that really is kind of the premise of the Assorted Calibers podcast. We talk about news, then we talk about all sorts of stuff.
But you know what? You don't have to have a whole lot of money to be a patron of our podcast.
That is true. I will say right now, we first up, you don't have to pay anything to listen to this show. You're more than likely listening to this right now on your various streaming or podcasting service. And hey, guess what? Here I am. And that's all you need to do. So thank you so much. We appreciate you listening. And there's no further obligations. But the very, very highest level of ACP Patreon is our what is it, our ultimate, I don't even know what it's called, but it's the one that gets you everything, and that's only $5 a month. It's pretty darn cheap. And and so you can go to become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast, and that full subscription will get you early release of the podcast. It'll get you the ACP film tracks, it'll get you the blooper reels, and it will get you the ACP mag dump. And thank you so much to all our supporters on Patreon at every level for that support.
Also, please remember to rate us on the podcast device of your choice after listening to us. Subscribe to us on that same platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
Yeah, share it with somebody. You've got an assignment. This is my Tyler Durden Fight Club Project Mayhem. You're going to share the show with a total stranger.
You're going to lose.
You can show the show with a total stranger, you're going to lose. I got a blog. It's weirdworld.com, and I'm also on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Erin Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Erin Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
Well, when it comes to the Scottish play, I, of course, am Queen Titania, and Weird Beard is just a little puck. Our roles are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.